The invite said black tie, but the real dress code was audacity. Imagine walking down the aisle wearing a $50,000 Vera Wang gown, smirking at the ex-wife sitting in the back row, thinking you've just stolen her fortune, her husband, and her life. Tiffany Miller thought she had checkmated the Sterling family. She thought the ring on her finger was the key to the city. But she forgot one tiny detail. The groom didn't own the fortune. The groom didn't even own the tuxedo he was wearing. The bride's mother. She owned the venue, the bank, and the very ground they were standing on. And she was about to turn this wedding into an eviction notice. This is the story of how a mistress celebrated too early, and a mother-in-law ended it all with 4 words. The dinner plates were bone china, rimmed with 24-carat gold, resting on a table of mahogany that had been in the Sterling family since the shipping boom of the 1920s. David Caldwell sat at the head of the table, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir, feeling every bit the master of the universe. To the outside world, David was the CEO of Sterling Caldwell Developments, a titan of Chicago real estate. He was handsome in that rugged, aging, gracefully way, salt and pepper hair, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and a smile that disarmed investors. But the truth, the one that whispered in the quiet halls of their Lakeshore Drive penthouse, was that David was merely a tenant in the House of Sterling. His wife, Amelia Sterling, sat across from him. She was quiet, elegant, and possessed a softness that people often mistook for weakness. She had spent the last 15 years raising their 2 children, attending charity galas, and letting David run the company her father had built, and her mother, Eleanor, had expanded into an empire. "You're quiet tonight, Amelia," David said, not looking up from his phone. "Just thinking, David," Amelia replied, her voice steady, "about the gala next week. And about Tiffany." David froze. The wine glass stopped mid-swirl. "Tiffany, my executive assistant. What about her? She called the house today, on your private line. She seemed very familiar." David laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "She's young Amelia. She doesn't understand boundaries. She was probably just confirming the flight details for the Tokyo conference. I'll speak to her." He wouldn't speak to her. He would sleep with her. He had been sleeping with Tiffany Miller for 6 months. Tiffany was everything Amelia wasn't. She was 24, loud, hungry, and unburdened by the weight of a legacy. She didn't care about the Sterling history. She cared about the Sterling credit card limit. She made David feel like a conqueror, not a custodian of someone else's money. The affair had started as a cliché, late nights at the office, a shared taxia, moment of weakness that turned into a weekly habit. But Tiffany was ambitious. She wasn't content being the Tuesday night secret. She wanted the Sunday morning spotlight. 2 weeks later, the bomb dropped. It wasn't a subtle explosion. It happened at the Sterling annual charity ball held at the Palmer House Hilton. The room was filled with Chicago's elite senators, old money families, and tech billionaires. Eleanor Sterling, the matriarch, was there holding court in the center of the room. Eleanor was 68, with hair like spun silver and eyes like cold steel. She leaned on a cane, not because she needed it, but because it looked like a scepter. David entered with Amelia on his arm, but his eyes were scanning the room for Tiffany. She wasn't supposed to be there. But there she was, wearing a dress that was too red, too tight, and far too expensive for an assistant's salary. She walked right up to the Sterling family table. "David," Tiffany said, her voice carrying over the gentle hum of the string quartet. "We need to talk. I can't hide it anymore." Amelia went rigid. Eleanor didn't even blink. She just took a slow sip of her champagne. "Tiffany not here," David hissed, grabbing her elbow. "Yes, here." Tiffany pulled away, placing a hand on her stomach. The gesture was universal. The room went silent. "I'm pregnant, David, and I'm done being the dirty little secret. You told me you loved me. You told me this marriage was a sham." David looked at Amelia, expecting tears, expecting a scene. But Amelia just looked at him with a profound, exhausting sadness. "Is it true?" Amelia asked. "Amelia, look, it's complicated," David stammered. "It's not complicated," Tiffany interjected, stepping closer to David, marking her territory. "We're in love. He's leaving you." Eleanor Sterling finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. "David, is this woman telling the truth?" David straightened his spine. He looked at the terrified faces of the board members, then at Tiffany's defiant glare. He made a calculation. He had been running the company for a decade. He knew where the bodies were buried. He had contacts leverage. If he left, the stock would tank. He thought he held the cards. "Yes," David said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm sorry, Amelia, but I'm in love with Tiffany, and she is carrying my child. I want a divorce." Amelia nodded slowly. She took her napkin, dabbed the corner of her mouth, and stood up. "Very well, David. I'll have Harrison send over the papers in the morning." She walked away without a tear. Tiffany beamed, clutching David's arm. She had won. She had dethroned the princess. Eleanor watched her daughter leave, then turned her gaze to David. "You are making a mistake, David, a very expensive one." "I built this company's modern portfolio, Eleanor." David scoffed, emboldened by the adrenaline. "I'm entitled to my share. The courts will see to that. We didn't sign a prenup 15 years ago because you didn't think I'd last. That was your mistake." Eleanor smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "We shall see." The divorce proceedings were shockingly fast. David and Tiffany couldn't believe their luck. Amelia didn't fight for the house. She didn't fight for the cars. She didn't even fight for the primary custody of the dog. She just wanted it over. "She's weak," Tiffany said, lounging by the pool of the penthouse David was currently renting at the company's expense. "She knows she can't keep a man like you. She's just rolling over." David, however, was slightly uneasy. Harrison Clark, the Sterling family lawyer, was a shark. He had once sued a hurricane for property damage and won. For him to simply hand over a settlement agreement that gave David a lump sum of $10 million and a clean break seemed too easy. "It's 10 million, Tiff," David said, looking at the papers. "I expected more. Half the assets would be in the hundreds of millions." "Take it," Tiffany urged, sipping a mimosa. "We don't need the headache. 10 million is enough to start your own firm. Plus, think about the wedding we can have. We need to rebrand you. New wife, new life, new empire." Tiffany was already planning the wedding before the ink on the divorce papers was dry. She wanted it to be the event of the decade. She wanted to rub Amelia's nose in it. "I want the grand ballroom at the Sterling Plaza Hotel," Tiffany announced. David choked on his coffee. "Tiffany, that hotel is the flagship property of my ex-wife's family. It's literally named after them." "Exactly," she smirked. "It's the most exclusive venue in the city. If we book it, it shows we aren't afraid. It shows we are the new power couple. Besides, they can't legally refuse service just because of a grudge. That's discrimination." Against his better judgment, David agreed. He wanted to show Eleanor that he wasn't afraid of her. The planning was a spectacle of excess. Tiffany hired Amelia's former florist, offering double the rate. She tried to poach the Sterling's private chef. She bought a dress that cost more than the average American home. Months passed. The date was set for a Saturday in June. Strangely, the booking at the Sterling Plaza was accepted without a hitch. The manager was polite, professional, and accommodating. When Tiffany demanded the royal suite for the bridal prep, it was given to her complimentary. "See," Tiffany gloated, "they're afraid of you, David. They know you could expose their business secrets if they cross you. We own this city now." But there were cracks in the facade. 2 weeks before the wedding, David tried to access his offshore accounts to pay the caterer. Access denied. He called the bank. "Security freeze Mr. Caldwell. Standard procedure during large transfers. It should be cleared in 48 hours. It took 72 hours. Then his credit card was declined at a business lunch. A clerical error, the bank assured him. Then came the gift. 3 days before the wedding, a courier arrived at David and Tiffany's apartment. He carried a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage Cartier watch, a tank watch gold with a leather strap. It was David's style, but it looked old. There was a note. It was handwritten on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. "To new beginnings. May you get exactly what you deserve. Eleanor." "Is this a threat?" Tiffany asked, holding the watch like it was a grenade. "It's a watch, Tiffany. A peace offering," David said, strapping it on. "She knows she's beaten. She wants to maintain a relationship so she can see the grandkid when it's born." Tiffany rubbed her belly, which was just starting to show a small bump. "Well, she can forget that. She's not seeing this baby. This baby is a Caldwell, not a Sterling." The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky over Chicago was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The Sterling Plaza was buzzing. Paparazzi, tipped off by Tiffany herself, were camped outside the entrance. Tiffany sat in the royal suite, surrounded by 5 bridesmaids she had known for less than a year. She looked in the mirror. She looked perfect. "This is it," she whispered to her reflection. "From intern to icon." Down in the groom's holding room, David was adjusting his tie. He felt a strange knot in his stomach. He tried to check his bank balance on his phone, just a nervous habit lately, but the app wouldn't load. No service. Probably just the thick walls. His best man, a guy named Greg he knew from the golf club, said, "You ready, man? You're marrying a model 20 years younger than you. You won the lottery." "Yeah." David smiled, pushing down the anxiety. "I won." The ceremony was set to begin at 4:00 p.m. The grand ballroom was draped in white orchids and crystals. 400 guests had arrived. Many were David's business associates, people who wanted to stay on the good side of the man they thought was a rising rival to the Sterling Empire. But as the guests took their seats, a murmur went through the crowd. Sitting in the very back row, dressed not in black, but in a stunning, vibrant emerald green suit, was Eleanor Sterling. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frowning. She was checking her watch. David walked down the aisle to the altar. He saw Eleanor. He nodded at her, a gesture of dominance. "I'm here in your hotel marrying my mistress, and there's nothing you can do." Eleanor didn't nod back. She simply turned her head and signaled to a man standing in the shadows of the side exit. It was Harrison Clark, the lawyer. He was holding a thick manila folder. The music swelled. The doors opened. Tiffany appeared. She walked down the aisle, a vision in white lace, soaking in the envy of every woman in the room. She locked eyes with David. She didn't look at Eleanor. Eleanor was the past. Tiffany was the future. She reached the altar. The priest began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Everything was going according to plan, until the part where the priest asked if anyone can show just cause why this man and this woman may not lawfully be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Usually this is a formality, a moment of silence. But today the silence was broken by the sharp, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a cane on the marble floor. Eleanor Sterling stood up. The room gasped. Tiffany spun around her veil, whipping. "Sit down, you old hag," she hissed, forgetting her microphone was already clipped on. Her voice boomed through the speakers. Eleanor didn't sit. She walked slowly to the center of the aisle. "I don't object to the marriage," Eleanor said, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "By all means, marry him. He's going to need the emotional support." "Then get out," David shouted, his face turning red. "Security, remove her." "Security works for me, David," Eleanor said calmly, "as does the priest, as does the catering staff, as does the bank that holds the mortgage on the penthouse you're currently sleeping in." "What are you talking about?" David stepped off the altar, approaching her. "We have a settlement. I have $10 million. "You had $10 million, Eleanor corrected. "Until 3:55 p.m. today." She motioned to Harrison Clark. He stepped forward and handed a document to David. "What is this?" David's hands were shaking. "That," Eleanor said, a cold smile touching her lips, "is the activation of the morality and competence clause hidden in the bylaws of the shell company you thought you were transferring your assets to. You see, David, you didn't build the modern portfolio. You signed the paperwork I prepared for you for 10 years. And you signed your exit papers without reading the addendum on page 42. "Page 42, David whispered. "The clause states that if the departing executive engages in public acts that damage the Sterling brand reputation on Sterling property, the severance is forfeited to cover damages." This is nonsense. I'll sue you." "You can try," Eleanor said. "But you'll need a lawyer, and since I've frozen your accounts pending a fraud investigation regarding the Tokyo expenses Tiffany booked, I don't think you can afford one." Tiffany ran down the aisle, grabbing David's arm. "David, what is she saying?" "Tell her to stop." Eleanor looked at Tiffany. "And you, my dear, I hope you enjoyed the bridal suite. The bill is on the counter. Since the wedding is no longer a corporate event, seeing as David is no longer a corporate entity, the friends and family discount has been revoked." "You can't do this," Tiffany screamed. "I already did," Eleanor replied. She looked around the room at the stunned guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bar is now open. However, it is a cash bar. The groom's tab has been declined." The silence that followed Eleanor Sterling's departure was heavier than the crystal chandeliers hanging above. For a few seconds, the 400 guests sat frozen like statues in a museum of disaster. Then the murmurs started. It sounded like the buzzing of 1,000 angry hornets. David stood at the altar, his face a mask of pale shock. He looked at the priest. Father Reynolds, a man he had played golf with just last month. "Father." David stammered, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "Let's continue. Just a family squabble. You know how it is. Eleanor is eccentric." Father Reynolds closed his Bible with a soft thud. He adjusted his glasses and looked at David with pity, but mostly with professional detachment. "I'm afraid I cannot, David. The Archdiocese has strict rules regarding the sanctity of the venue. And as Mrs. Sterling pointed out, the permit for this ceremony was revoked 10 minutes ago. Technically, we are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Tiffany shrieked. She looked like a deranged princess, her mascara beginning to run as the heat of the moment flushed her skin. "I am the bride. This is my day. You work for God, not for that old witch. God may overlook your sins. Ms. Miller, the priest said, stepping down from the altar and walking toward the exit. But the Sterling Plaza management does not overlook unpaid invoices. The guests didn't wait to be told twice. It started with the B-list business associates, the ones who were only there to network with David. They stood up, checking their phones, pretending to have emergencies. Then the socialites, realizing there would be no open bar and no lobster thermidor, gathered their clutches and hurried toward the exits. "Wait!" David shouted, running down the aisle, grabbing the arm of a man in a grey suit. It was Jonathan Eames, a venture capitalist David was counting on for seed money for his new firm. "Jonathan, don't leave. It's a misunderstanding. We'll go to the secondary venue. We can—" Jonathan pulled his arm away as if David were contagious. "David, let go. I just got an alert on my Bloomberg terminal. Sterling Caldwell stock just jumped 4% on the news of your termination and the internal audit. You're toxic, man. Don't call me." Within 15 minutes, the grand ballroom was empty. The only people left were David Tiffany, her 5 confused bridesmaids, and the hotel staff, who were now efficiently stripping the tables of the silverware and centerpieces. A man in a sharp tuxedo walked up to them. It was Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the hotel. He held a silver tray, but instead of champagne, it held a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Caldwell," Henderson said, his voice smooth and cold, "please find the itemized bill for the services rendered thus far." "Bill?" David laughed hysterically. "Put it on my account, or send it to the penthouse. As Mrs. Sterling mentioned, you no longer have an account, and the penthouse lease has been terminated effective immediately due to a violation of the moral turpitude clause in your occupancy agreement." Henderson extended the tray. "We require immediate payment for the floral arrangements, the security setup, the room rentals, and the cancellation fee for the catering. The food, alas, will be donated to a shelter, but the preparation costs stand." Tiffany snatched the paper. Her eyes widened. $85,000. "For a wedding that didn't happen." "For a wedding you booked, Ms. Miller," Henderson corrected. "We accept all major credit cards, although I believe the terminal declined your Amex earlier." "David, do something!" Tiffany screamed, throwing the paper at his chest. David pulled out his wallet. His hands were shaking so hard, he dropped 2 cards on the floor. He picked up his black card, the symbol of his status for the last 10 years. He handed it to Henderson. Henderson produced a portable card reader. He inserted the card. Beep. Declined. "Try this one," David said, sweat dripping down his forehead. He handed a visa. Beep. Declined. Card reported stolen. "Stolen," David choked. "I didn't report it. Stolen. Mrs. Sterling is the primary account holder on the family trust that backs these cards," Henderson explained patiently. "She reported them compromised about 20 minutes ago." Tiffany was hyperventilating. "My parents are here. My dad is in the lobby. He can pay." David looked at her. Tiffany came from a modest background in Ohio. Her father was a retired high school football coach. He didn't have $85,000 liquid. He probably didn't have that in his retirement fund. "We can't ask your dad, Tiffany," David hissed. "It's humiliating enough." "Then what do we do?" "We leave," David said, grabbing her hand. "We just leave. They can't keep us here." He turned to walk out, but 2 large security guards blocked the path. "The police have already been called regarding the theft of services," Henderson said, checking his watch. "However, Mrs. Sterling left instructions. She is willing to absorb the cost of the cancellation. If you agree to vacate the premises immediately and surrender the engagement ring." Tiffany gasped, clutching her left hand. The ring was a 4-carat cushion, cut diamond. It was worth nearly $100,000. It was her insurance policy. "No," Tiffany cried. "It's mine. He gave it to me." "Technically," Henderson said, "Mr. Caldwell purchased that ring using a company expense account labeled Client Relations. Since the marriage did not occur and the purchase was unauthorized, it is company property." David looked at the security guards, then at Tiffany, then at the ring. He was tired. He was broke. And he saw the flashing lights of a police cruiser reflecting against the lobby glass doors down the hall. "Give him the ring, Tiffany," David said, his voice hollow. "David, are you crazy? Give him the damn ring!" David roared, snapping for the first time. "We have no money. We have no lawyers. Do you want to give birth in a holding cell?" Sobbing, Tiffany slid the ring off her finger. She slammed it onto the silver tray. "Excellent choice," Henderson said, pocketing the ring. "The service exit is through the kitchen. Please ensure you do not disturb the guests in the lobby on your way out." The fall from grace wasn't a slide. It was a cliff. 3 days later, David and Tiffany were sitting in the living room of Tiffany's old apartment. It was a cozy 1-bedroom in a gentrifying neighborhood, which was a polite way of saying it was small, smelled faintly of cat litter from the neighbor's unit, and the sirens outside never stopped. David was sitting on a beanbag chair, the only furniture Tiffany owned besides her bed and a scratched IKEA table. He was wearing the same suit trousers from the wedding, though he had finally taken off the tuxedo jacket. "We need to sell the car," Tiffany said. She was pacing the small room, eating dry cereal out of the box because they hadn't gone grocery shopping. "The Porsche is a lease, Tiffany." David rubbed his temples. "I don't own it. The company is coming to collect it tomorrow." "Well, what do you own, David?" she snapped. "Because for the last 6 months, all I heard was how you were the brains behind Sterling Caldwell, how you were the genius, how you made them all the money." "I am the genius," David shot back. "I made the deals, I designed the skylines. Then why can't you get a job?" That was the question. David had spent the last 72 hours making calls. He had a Rolodex of contacts that would make a senator jealous. He had called headhunters, hateful developers, even old college buddies. The response was identical every time. Silence, or worse, polite refusal. David loved to help, but we're in a hiring freeze. "David, honestly," Eleanor called. She didn't say much, just asked if we were hiring you. The implication was enough. "We can't lose the Sterling contract." "David, who is this? Please remove this number." He was radioactive. Eleanor hadn't just fired him. She had blackballed him from the industry. She had effectively erased his career. "I have an interview today," David said, standing up and trying to smooth the wrinkles in his shirt. "With Marcus Thorne. He's Eleanor's biggest competitor. He hates the Sterlings. He'll hire me just to spite her." "He better," Tiffany muttered, "because the rent on this place is due in a week, and I spent my savings on the bridesmaids' dresses." David took an Uber to the Thorne Tower. He couldn't afford the premium ride, so he arrived in a Toyota Corolla that smelled like stale smoke. He walked into the lobby, chin up, trying to channel the arrogance he used to wear, like a second skin. He was kept waiting in the lobby for 45 minutes. Finally, a secretary called him back. Marcus Thorne didn't meet him in a boardroom. He met him in a glass-walled office overlooking the city David used to rule. Marcus was a young, aggressive developer who usually wore sneakers with his suits. David Caldwell. Marcus grinned, not standing up to shake hands. The man of the hour, or should I say the man of the viral video? David winced. Someone had filmed the wedding interruption. It had 2 million views on TikTok. The caption was #groom owned by Grandma. I can bring a lot to your firm, Marcus, David said, ignoring the jab. I know the Sterling strategy inside and out. I know their weak points. I can deliver the River North project to you. Marcus laughed, leaning back in his chair. The River North project, David Eleanor, sold me the land for that project this morning. David froze. What? She called me at 8 a.m., offered me the prime lot at 20% below market value. A steal. Absolute robbery. Why would she do that? David asked, his mind reeling. She said it was a consulting fee. Marcus smiled cruelly. The condition of the sale was that I bring you in here, listen to your pitch, and then tell you exactly why you'll never work in this town again. David felt the blood drain from his face. You took a bribe to humiliate me. Business is business, David. And Eleanor Sterling is the best in the business. She told me to tell you that the audit on the Tokyo accounts is complete, apparently charging a $15,000 escort service to the company card as translation services is a felony. She's handing the file to the district attorney tomorrow. David stood up, his legs feeling like jelly. The Tokyo trip. That was when he first took Tiffany. He had gotten sloppy. He thought he was untouchable. I need to go, David whispered. One more thing, Marcus called out as David reached the door. She said to tell you that she's willing to drop the criminal charges, if you agree to her terms. David turned around. What terms? She wants you to leave Chicago, permanently, and she wants you to sign a confession admitting to the embezzlement just to keep in her safe. You sign she doesn't press charges. You stay. You go to prison. David walked out of the Thorn Tower into the blinding sunlight. He felt nausea rising in his throat. He pulled out his phone to call Tiffany to tell her they had to run. They had to go to her parents in Ohio, or maybe Florida. Somewhere Eleanor couldn't reach, but his phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany first. David. Where are you two men are here? They say they are from the bank. They're taking the TV and my laptop. They say my name was on the secondary credit card you used for the furniture. Do something. David stared at the phone. He realized then that Eleanor wasn't just punishing him. She was dismantling him piece by piece. He didn't reply. He walked to a park bench and sat down. He watched the people walking by, happy couples, businessmen on calls, tourists. He looked at his wrist to check the time, but the wrist was bare. He had sold the Patek Philippe yesterday for cash to pay for the movers. He had the gold Cartier watch Eleanor had sent him. The gift. He dug it out of his pocket. He hadn't worn it since the wedding. He looked at the back of the watch case. There was an inscription he hadn't noticed before. He squinted to read the tiny cursive engraving. Time runs out for everyone. Tick-tock. David put his head in his hands. He was 45 years old. He had a pregnant mistress he didn't love, $0 in the bank, and the most powerful woman in Chicago hunting him for sport. He needed a drink. But he realized, with a jolt of pathetic irony, he didn't even have enough cash in his pocket for a beer. The apartment walls were thin enough that David could hear the neighbor coughing, but the silence between him and Tiffany was deafening. It had been 4 days since the wedding. 4 days of instant noodles sleeping on a mattress on the floor and watching his phone battery die because the charger had been in the Porsche that was repossessed. Tiffany wasn't handling the transition to poverty well. She sat on the edge of the mattress, scrolling through Instagram on her phone, the only thing she hadn't sold yet. My friends are blocking me, she said, her voice flat. Jessica, who I've known since college, blocked me. The bridal party group chat deleted. They were fair-weather friends, Tiff. David grunted, staring at the ceiling. We'll make new ones, once I get back on my feet. Get back on your feet? Tiffany laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. David, you don't have feet. Eleanor cut them off. I called my dad. He said if I come home, I can stay in the basement, but you're not welcome. He saw the TikTok. We're a team, remember? David sat up, trying to touch her arm. You, me, and the baby. We just need to leave Chicago. We'll go to Houston. I have contacts there. Tiffany pulled her arm away. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time, without the filter of wealth. She saw the grey roots coming in the wrinkles around his eyes, the desperation. She realized she wasn't looking at a tycoon. She was looking at an unemployed, middle-aged man with a fraud investigation hanging over his head. I'm going for a walk, she said, standing up. I need air. Take my coat, David offered. It's chilly. I don't need your coat, she snapped. She grabbed her purse and walked out the door. She didn't go for a walk. She walked 3 blocks to a Starbucks, bought a coffee with the last $5 in her hidden emergency cash, and made a phone call. Sterling Enterprises Harrison Clark's office, a crisp voice answered. This is Tiffany Miller, she said, her hand trembling. Don't hang up. I have information about the Tokyo accounts, about the offshore shells. I know where he hid the hard drive. There was a pause. Then the secretary's voice returned, sweeter this time. Please hold for Mr. Clark. An hour later, a black town car pulled up to the curb. Tiffany got in. She didn't look back at the apartment. Back in the apartment, David waited. 1 hour became 3. 3 became 6. Night fell. He started to worry. Maybe something happened to the baby. He borrowed the neighbor's phone to call her. It went straight to voicemail. He paced the room. Then he noticed something. The closet door was slightly ajar. He opened it. Her suitcase was gone. Her makeup bag was gone. On the IKEA table, there wasn't a note. There was just a pregnancy test kit box. Empty. Confused. David looked at the trash can. Sitting right on top was the test stick. He picked it up. He squinted at the little window. 1 line. Negative. He dug through the trash. There were 3 other tests, all negative. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She was never pregnant. It was a trap. The baby was just a leverage play to get the ring, to get the wedding, to lock him down before he could change his mind. And now that the money was gone, the baby was gone, too. David sank to the floor, holding the plastic stick. He laughed. It started as a chuckle and turned into a manic sob. He had blown up his life, his marriage, and his reputation for a lie. Then the pounding on the door started. Police, open up! David didn't run. He didn't have the energy. He walked to the door and opened it. 2 officers stood there, flanked by Harrison Clark. David Caldwell, the officer asked. Yes. You're under arrest for corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Hands behind your back. As they cuffed him, David looked at Harrison. How I wiped the servers. Harrison adjusted his silk tie. You did. But Ms. Miller kept a backup. She just handed it over in exchange for immunity. She's on a flight to Phoenix as we speak. One way. David was marched out into the flashing red and blue lights. The neighbors he felt superior to were all watching filming with their phones. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and fear. David had been there for 24 hours. His suit was wrinkled, his stubble was thick, and his arrogance was entirely gone. The door opened. He expected his public defender. Instead, Amelia Sterling walked in. She looked different. Not flashy, not vindictive. She looked free. She wore a simple cream blouse and trousers, her hair pulled back. She sat down across from him. She didn't have a lawyer with her. "Amelia," David croaked. "Amelia, please. You have to help me. They're talking about 10 years, minimum." "Hello, David," she said softly. "I made a mistake," David pleaded, leaning forward, the handcuffs clinking against the metal table. "I was seduced. I was foolish. But I'm the father of your children. Don't let them see their father in prison." "The children are fine, David. They are at boarding school in Switzerland. I told them you've gone on a long sabbatical to find yourself." "Amelia, that girl. She lied. She wasn't pregnant. She set me up. I can fix this. If you just talk to Eleanor, tell her to drop the charges, I'll sign anything." Amelia looked at him with a gaze that wasn't angry, just disappointed. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about Tiffany. This is about you. You spent 15 years thinking you were the smartest person in the room. You thought my mother was old and I was stupid." "I never thought you were stupid." David lied. "Yes, you did. You thought my silence was submission. It was patience." Amelia placed a folder on the table. "What is this?" "Mother wanted to let you rot," Amelia said. "She wanted to watch the trial on TV with popcorn. But I convinced her otherwise." David felt a spark of hope. "You did? Why?" "Because I don't want your name dragging my children down in the press for the next 2 years. I want the name Caldwell to disappear." She slid the folder toward him. "This is a plea deal, but not with the district attorney, with us." David opened it. His eyes scanned the pages. "We will withdraw the complaint. We will attribute the missing funds to a clerical error in the international accounting software. The police will release you due to lack of evidence." "Thank God." David breathed, tears welling up. "Thank you, Amelia." "Read the rest," she said sharply. David looked at the bottom of the page. Condition 1. David Caldwell must legally change his name. He may never use the name Caldwell or Sterling again. Condition 2. He is permanently banned from the state of Illinois. Condition 3. He accepts the position of night shift manager at a Sterling-owned logistical warehouse in Anchorage, Alaska. Condition 4. His wages will be garnished at 75% until the stolen $4.2 million is repaid. At his current salary, this will take approximately 140 years. "Alaska," David whispered. "A warehouse. Amelia, I'm a CEO." "You are an unemployed thief," Amelia corrected. "Those are the terms. You sign, you walk out of here, get on a bus and go to Alaska. You get a small apartment, a warm coat and a job. You don't sign. The DA walks in next and you go to Statesville prison for 15 years. David looked at the pen. He looked at Amelia. He remembered the cold nights in the penthouse, the gold plates, the feeling of power. It all seemed like a dream now. "Does she know?" David asked, referring to Tiffany. "Tiffany." Amelia smiled faintly. "Harrison gave her $5,000 and a bus ticket. Last I heard, she's waitressing in a diner in Arizona. She's someone else's problem now." David picked up the pen. His hand shook. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he said, and this time he almost meant it. "I know, David," she replied, standing up and smoothing her pants. "Goodbye." He signed the paper. The ink on the plea deal was barely dry when the reality of David's new existence began to take hold. He wasn't given time to mourn his former life. There was no farewell party, no packing of boxes in the penthouse. There was only Harrison Clark standing by the back exit of the police station with a plastic bag containing a thrift store winter coat, a bus ticket, and a new driver's license. David looked at the license. The photo was his, taken at the station looking haggard and grey, but the name read Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur. David spat the taste of ash in his mouth. Who is Arthur? Arthur is a nobody, Harrison said, checking his Rolex, a watch David used to admire. And that is exactly what you are now. The bus leaves from the Greyhound station in 40 minutes. Do not miss it. If you are found within Illinois state lines after midnight, the deal is void, and I will personally drive you to Statesville Prison. David didn't argue. He took the bag. He walked the 12 blocks to the station in the rain, his Italian loafers the last remnant of his wealth soaking through with dirty street water. 3 months later, the heat in Kingman, Arizona was enough to melt the asphalt. Tiffany Miller wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She was wearing a polyester uniform that smelled of fryer grease and stale coffee. Her name tag, crookedly pinned to her chest, read Tiff. She was working the lunch rush at Big Earl's Pit Stop, a roadside diner frequented by long-haul truckers and tourists who had taken a wrong turn on the way to the Grand Canyon. Hey, Tiff refill on the sweet tea, sweetheart. A man with grease under his fingernails shouted from booth 4. Coming, Tiffany muttered, grabbing the pitcher. Her feet throbbed. She was used to wearing Louboutins, not orthopedic sneakers from Walmart. As she poured the tea, the television mounted in the corner of the diner caught her eye. It was a rerun of Entertainment Tonight. The headline flashed across the screen, Chicago's elite, where are they now? Tiffany froze. The pitcher overflowed, spilling sticky tea onto the table. Hey, watch it, the trucker yelled, but Tiffany couldn't look away. On the screen was a photo of her and David from the wedding day, the moment before Eleanor stood up. The caption read, "The billionaire wedding that wasn't." The host was laughing, making a joke about gold diggers digging their own graves. Then the image changed. It showed a paparazzi shot of Tiffany leaving the engagement ring on the silver tray. That's me, she whispered, a lump forming in her throat. That ain't you, the trucker laughed, wiping the table with napkins. That girl was almost rich. You're just clumsy. Tiffany walked back to the kitchen, the laughter of the diner patrons ringing in her ears. She leaned against the stainless steel counter and slid down to the floor. She checked her bank account on her phone. Balance $412.50. She thought about the hard drive she had stolen. She thought about the immunity she had bought with it. She was free, yes. She wasn't in jail. But as she looked around the greasy kitchen, smelling the burning onions, she realized Eleanor Sterling hadn't just defeated her. Eleanor had erased her potential. Tiffany wasn't a villain anymore. She was a punchline. And in the brutal heat of the Arizona desert, she realized she would spend the rest of her life serving people who had a fraction of the ambition she once had. 4,000 miles away, the wind didn't burn. It bit. Anchorage, Alaska was in the grip of a polar vortex. The temperature was 20 degrees below zero. At the Sterling Logistics Northern Hub, a massive corrugated metal warehouse on the edge of the tundra, the night shift was halfway done. David, now Arthur, pushed a heavy cart of frozen seafood crates up a ramp. His back screamed in protest. His hands, gloved in thick wool, were stiff with cold. "Move it, Penhaligon," the shift supervisor shouted. His name was Jerry, a man 10 years younger than David, who enjoyed wielding his tiny amount of power. Truck number 4 leaves in 10 minutes. If those crabs aren't loaded, I'm docking your pay. I'm moving as fast as I can, Jerry. David wheezed, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Not fast enough. Maybe that's why you're a 45-year-old rookie. Jerry sneered. David gritted his teeth and shoved the cart. He slipped on a patch of ice, his knees slamming into the concrete. Pain shot up his legs. He lay there for a second, staring at the industrial lights buzzing overhead. He remembered the lights of the chandelier in the penthouse. He remembered the feel of silk sheets. He remembered the taste of 1942 Pinot Noir. Now the only thing he tasted was bile and the metallic tang of blood from biting his lip. He hauled himself up. He checked his wrist. The Cartier watch Eleanor had given him, the one with the inscription, "Time runs out for everyone," was still there. He had tried to pawn it his first week in Anchorage. The pawnbroker had laughed at him. "This is a replica, pal," the pawnbroker had said. "Good gold plating, but the movement is cheap Chinese quartz, worth maybe $50. Even the gift was a lie. Eleanor hadn't given him a family heirloom. She had given him a prop, a reminder that his entire life with the Sterlings had been an imitation of value. At 6 a.m. the shift ended. David walked to the break room to collect his pay stub. He tore open the envelope. Gross pay, $800. Federal tax, $120. State tax, $0. Court-mandated restitution. Sterling trust, minus $600. Net pay, $80. $80 for 60 hours of back-breaking labor. David stared at the number. He did the math again in his head. At this rate, he would pay off the $4.2 million debt in roughly 150 years. He wasn't working to pay it off. He was working to survive until he died. He walked out into the snow, the wind howling like a banshee. He pulled his collar up. There was no escape. The Sterling arm was long, and its grip was iron. He was a hamster in a frozen wheel, running toward a horizon he would never reach. Back in Chicago, the seasons were changing, but the atmosphere inside the Sterling Plaza Hotel was eternal spring. It was the 1-year anniversary of the wedding that wasn't, though no one called it that anymore. Tonight was the Phoenix Gala, a celebration of Sterling Enterprises' record-breaking fiscal year. The grand ballroom was unrecognizable from the disaster of the previous year. The white orchids were replaced by vibrant gold and violet arrangements. The air smelled of expensive perfume and success. Amelia Sterling moved through the crowd like royalty. She wasn't the quiet, shadow-dwelling wife anymore. She was the CEO. She had taken the reins after David's departure, and to the shock of the board and perhaps even her mother, she was brilliant. She led with empathy, but she negotiated with steel. Amelia Darling. It was Marcus Thorne, the rival developer, who had humiliated David. He bowed slightly. "The River North project is ahead of schedule. You were right about the zoning permits. Brilliant maneuver." "Thank you, Marcus." Amelia smiled, sipping her sparkling water. "I learned from the best, and I learned from the worst." She made her way to the head table where Eleanor Sterling sat. Eleanor was frailer now, using a wheelchair, but her eyes were still as sharp as diamonds. "You look tired, Mother," Amelia said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "You should go upstairs and rest." "I'm not tired," Eleanor replied, her voice a dry rasp. "I'm entertained." "Entertained by what?" Eleanor tapped her phone screen. "Harrison sends me the weekly reports from the north." Amelia looked away. I don't need to see them. You should, Eleanor insisted. It's important to remember that mercy is a luxury we cannot always afford. But justice is a necessity. Amelia looked at the phone. It was a video clip. It showed a man in a warehouse, slipping on ice, falling and struggling to get back up. Do you pity him? Eleanor asked. Amelia watched the man on the screen, the man she had loved for 15 years, the man who had slept with her assistant and tried to steal her heritage. She searched her heart for pity. She found none. No, Amelia said softly. I don't pity him. He chose his path. He wanted everything without earning anything. Now he has exactly what he earned. Good, Eleanor nodded. Then my work is done. The gala ended at midnight. The guests spilled out onto the magnificent mile, laughing drunk on champagne and power. In the shadows of the hotel lobby, Harrison Clark stood by the security monitors. He typed a final email to the HR department of the Anchorage Logistics Hub. Subject, Employee 8940-B. Penhaligon message, increase shift rotation to include weekends. Productivity metrics are slipping. If he complains, remind him of the alternative clause in his plea agreement regarding state penitentiary transfer. Harrison hit send. He closed his laptop. Outside, the Chicago wind was gentle, carrying the scent of the lake. In Arizona, Tiffany Miller was sleeping in a trailer that shook every time a train passed, dreaming of a dress she would never wear again. In Alaska, David Caldwell sat on the edge of a cot in a room the size of a prison cell, eating a can of cold beans, listening to the wind try to tear the roof off. He looked at the fake gold watch. Tick, tock. The time hadn't run out. It had just slowed down to an agonizing crawl. The drama was over, the audience had gone home, and the actors who had tried to steal the show were left in the dark, realizing too late that the curtain never really falls, it just crushes you. And there you have it, the complete unadulterated downfall of David Caldwell and Tiffany Miller. It's a story that proves one universal rule. The higher you climb on a ladder built of lies, the harder you hit the ground when the truth kicks it out from under you. David thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize he was just a pawn on Eleanor Sterling's board. He traded a life of luxury and a loyal wife for a fleeting ego boost and a fake gold watch. And Tiffany. She learned that marrying up only works if the man you're marrying actually owns the elevator. This wasn't just revenge. It was a corporate liquidation of two human beings' futures. It makes you wonder, was Eleanor Sterling a monster, or was she simply the ultimate protector of her family's his legacy? I want to hear from you in the comments below. Question of the day. Did Amelia let David off too easy with the Alaska deal, or is working in a frozen warehouse for the rest of his life actually worse than prison? And what about Tiffany? Did she deserve to lose everything? Or was she just a victim of David's manipulation? If you loved this saga of wealth, betrayal, and icy justice, please hit that like button. It helps get these stories out to more people. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next drama drops. I've got a story coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid the ticket from his wife until she found the receipt. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you cross, because you never know who really owns the venue.